We'll just make sure we're all ready to go. Recording and live, thank you. We have had a karakia to start off our day, so we have a closing one at the end. I've got no apologies received, and welcome to Councillors McCall, Laws and Forbes, so are all online, along with some of our council staff. And welcome to everyone that's joined us in the chamber today as well. We'll get right into the meeting. We've got confirmation of the agenda. We do public forum before we do that. So we would like to welcome Pierre Marasti up from Extinction Rebellion. Thank you. Welcome, Pierre, and just turn your mic on. Thank you.
Kia ora katoa. We want to start by thanking you for inviting us to give some input into the drafting of the future climate action plan. We did, and we were happy to hear during the webinar that even the business representatives present were asking for more tangible actions. We also want to thank you for your work on the 10-year plan and to express our full support for the maximum proposed investment in public transport and for the maximum proposed investment in the new environmental fund. But we also need to cover the latest climate news, and they are catastrophic. April was the 11th month in a row to break temperature records, and the last 12 months were 1.61 degrees above pre-industrial average. So the Paris Agreement target has now failed, and we'll have to deal with the consequences of our inaction. The warming of the planet during these last 12 months has been 10 times faster than what is expected by the models. 10 times. Let's hope that the coming La Niña cycle will slow this trend down, but with the ocean's temperatures continuing their alarming upward trend, this is not a given. These record temperatures have, of course, consequences. In the last month or so, you must have all seen the desert town of Dubai being flooded. Southern China has also been flooded. And after years of deadly drought, Kenya has been flooded, killing hundreds. More than 100 have also died through floods in Brazil, where weeks after the initial flood, water still hasn't receded in many places. And deadly flood happened in Afghanistan too. In Western countries also, Europe just experienced widespread floods, while Texas was hit by a deadly storm after being hit by floods. In Europe again, a late cold snap has destroyed the harvest of many orchards, and if you lack wine from Chablis, up to 25% of their vineyards have been destroyed by a hailstorm. Chablis will be expensive this year. A more systemic crisis is happening in Southeast Asia, where the population is dealing with more and more deadly heat waves, and Catalonia is in a state of emergency as they are running out of water. Summer hasn't even started in Spain. Here, of course, floods are becoming our new normal. Also, as predicted by the IPCC, now that we have passed 1.5 degrees of warming, we can expect up to 90% of coral reefs to die. It is happening as we speak in Australia, where most of the Great Barrier Reef is bleaching. Now, I am sure that many people do not care about coral reefs, but let me remind you that 25% of marine species need coral reefs to live. No coral reefs, no fish to eat. And it is not just fish dependent on corals that are suffering from the extreme temperatures of our oceans. If you like fish and chips, be warned that cods cannot spawn when temperatures are too high. They're on a fast decline too. The situation is bad, and you are already all being affected each time you go buy food. It is about time to stop talking and to start acting. There is at least some good news on that front. We sent you the electric homes report from Rewiring Aotearoa after the last meeting. It proves that to electrify everything in the country, besides being the low-hanging fruit of real climate action, is now the cheapest way forward for New Zealanders. It is cheaper in New Zealand to drive electric vehicles. It is cheaper to warm your home with electricity. It is cheaper to warm your water with electricity. And it is cheaper to cook with electricity. You can also make it even cheaper by producing your own electricity. There now is really no excuse left to keep polluting with filthy, old fossil fuel-powered machines. Who in their right mind will want to pay more for the privilege of committing civilizational suicide? There is more positive news. Last week, Rewiring Aotearoa released its follow-up electric farms report. It shows in complete transparency how New Zealand farmers can be at the forefront of the country's energy transition while creating new sources of revenues for themselves. We will share this report with you, and we hope that you will dig into it to see how the ORC can help support this transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Are there any questions today? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, are you able to elaborate a bit? You know, you said the farmers were able to generate some electricity, or is that what they're saying?
Yes, so Rewiring Aotearoa, it's an organization that it's a sister organization of an American one and an Australian one that was started with an Australian who's been working on the Inflation Reduction Act in America. It's a weird name, but that's where they get the funding for the decarbonization of the country. And they are promoting electrification in New Zealand, as well as a more distributed renewable electricity generation system. And the whole thesis is about mostly around solar power and the fact that existing roofs without solar is basically a waste of space. It's a way to generate some clean electricity without needing any more land. And farmers are in an especially good situation for that, because not only they get a lot of land that they can put solar panels wherever they want on their land, but they get big sheds as well that can support a lot of solar. That enables them on one side to have a lot less expenses for their work through the electrification of the machines they are using, but as well it enables them to export electricity that they produce and store at times of higher demand. The other advantage for farmers is that usually the land is close from medium or high voltage lines, which makes it a lot easier for medium size renewable electricity production system to be hooked up to the grid compared to houses where the cables are not so big in town. So it is a win-win for farmers. It's cheaper for them to run their operations by electrifying, and they can make deals with electrical companies to export in time of needs when the electricity price is especially high. It is all in the report. I really encourage you.
You will forward that to us, will you? Yeah.
Yes, I will forward it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. Councillor Wilson, and then I think Councillor Malcolm, were you wanting to ask something?
Thanks, Pierre. And I really genuinely want to thank you for you always having the positive ideas. And this isn't a new one for a lot of the rural areas and for some people who are working on looking at alternative land uses. There is an issue though with how New Zealand, I described it the other day as very opaque, of the generation and the lines system in New Zealand. And I'm just wondering about the advocacy for a change in the generation and transmission space. And are you aware of any of that happening? Because until it's a transparent system, it's not a particularly easy system for anyone to consider those sort of developments.
It is all covered in the report. So again, I encourage you to read it. They really have some very practical demands that would help improve the legislation to make this faster, to make it happen faster, because it's possible, just needs to happen faster.
So the next question is, would you see us as a regional council having an advocacy role with government for that?
Well, you know better than me the scope of your powers. So on one side, I definitively encourage you to have an advocacy role, but you do have a legislative regulatory role as well. I'm not sure exactly how you can help, but I'm sure you can help improve the situation as well from the ORC.
Thanks, Pierre.
Right, Councillor Malcolm?
No.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to ask a question or shall we leave it?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pierre. We've come to the end of questions. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for your efforts. Yeah.
Right, we're on to confirmation of agenda. And we do just want to note that item 10.5 be taken first due to a requirement for our external advisor to be present. So if somebody could move that, that would be helpful. Councillor Somerville and Councillor Mepham will second. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Just a reminder on declarations of interest. So yeah, if you've got any of those.
Don't we all on the representation
Oh.
review?
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. No presentations today, and confirmation of minutes, and you'll see there we've got some from the RPS panel recommendations that are there for proactive release as well. Does somebody care to move those?
There's a slight amendment on page 10 where I think Councillor McCall and myself's names have been transposed in the for and against, which I apologize, I shouldn't have left that much earlier, but
We've got that recorded, Trudy, and we're okay with where that occurs. Yep. Thanks, Councillor
you may want to
Wilson.
confirm with Councillor McCall if he's online about it. I think I've got that right.
Yeah. Any other corrections that need to be made? No. All right. Just checking whether I need to do this in more than one lot. Yeah, there's 2 lots, so I need to do them separately, probably, So yeah, confirming the public minutes of council meeting on the 27th of March. Somebody care to move those? Councillor Mepham, seconded Councillor Ware, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And then confirming the public excluded minutes of the council meeting, which will now be public, obviously. Somebody care to move those?
That amendments.
Oh yeah, with the amendment, Councillor Wilson and seconded Councillor Somerville, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, so we have some actions there as well. What is it? I don't think we've got any that are due yet on there. Anyone beg to differ on that, but I can't see any that are due yet.
There's been an update put against any that have had some movement. But yeah, they'll be reported on full by due dates.
Thanks very much. Yeah, with those. So yeah, we're going to do the 10.5 first. That's ahead of chairpersons or chief executives report as well. That's correct. We've got the people we need with us, Amanda. Do indeed. Welcome. So welcome to Stephen and to Amanda. Just give me a wee moment to get something set up here. So yeah, today we are seeking direction on which option to progress to an initial proposal stage, noting that there would be formal consultation process. It's not a decision today. So yeah, Amanda or Stephen, did you want to introduce this paper at all?
Yeah, I guess just to say thank you for that introduction. As Gretchen has just mentioned, this paper today is seeking direction on what we will then bring back to the June council meeting, which would be the formal notification of an initial proposal, and that initial proposal then goes out for the public consultation process. But what we're looking for today was direction on what that initial proposal should look like. And we decided the paper was probably going to be clearer than doing another workshop at this point in time.
Perfect. Did you want to elaborate on that at all, Stephen?
Yeah, no, just really to remind the council, I guess, of the process. We're well on track. meet the statutory deadline of the 31st of July to notify the initial proposal. You've been through a process of workshops and discussions. There's been a process of community engagement, and that's brought us to where we are today, where we've considered a few options. We've taken some instruction from you and done a little bit of additional work on some of those options, and those are what are for you today to give us a steer to take through to the initial proposal. Remembering that the initial proposal, which goes out for consultation, must be one proposal. We don't go out with options. We go out with one proposal. And certainly we can provide information on the options that have been considered during this process for the public to be aware of and to see the context of those discussions. But we take one proposal out at the initial proposal stage, and that will go through a formal public consultation process, which you will then consider further down the track.
Great. So yeah, there's been some initial feedback as well, isn't there? So we've taken that into account, and we've had a workshop as well that councillors will remember and had a chance to attend. I can see that we have some hands up already, and we're ready to go now on the question section. So Councillor Laws, you were first.
Thank you. I've read through this paper, but I don't see anything here to do with the Maori ward or consultation upon. Why?
So consideration of a Māori ward is one of the precursors that leads to the membership representation review. So consideration of that needed to be done by December last year, but it's not a decision that has to come to council. So through discussions mid last year, there was guidance not to bring that decision forward for specific consideration of it. So it has been, it's been part of the process, but not come to the council table.
No, so I can't understand why we're not consulting on whether or not our region wants a Maori ward or not.
That's outside the scope of this review.
Well, it's not. It's a representation review. So clearly it includes a Maori ward or a potential. It's not outside the scope.
Just listen to what the answer is from our expert here with us, thanks.
So that process had to be concluded by November last year. The council's already considered and made the call not to proceed with any establishment, and so that decision stands and is not subject to consultation in this representation review.
Could we make it such now?
No, that would be outside the scope of the statute.
Really? What statute would that be?
It's under the provisions of the Local Government Act 2001. The Local Electoral Act 2001, which is what this process is undertaken under. I could provide some more detail subsequently if that's wanted.
Yeah, that's no problem. You haven't. Well, we need a bit of time to think on the answer to that one in detail, no doubt, but you've given the answer. Thank you. Right, Councillor Scott.
So through the consultation process, we'll go out with one proposal. I assume at the same time we'll also include the status quo.
Well, it depends what option that you go out with, but yes, if the option that's proposed is something different to the status quo, then part of the context and background information will be to say this is the current situation and this is what the council is proposing, and we are asking for your feedback on that proposal. So yeah, we would certainly have that as part of the information.
And yeah, but so I assume the consultation will be also on the status quo. So for example, I don't like the proposal, I want the status quo. So, as opposed to more than information, part of the consultation. Surely, otherwise, if the proposal goes out and it's not supported, what happens?
So this is one of those examples of where the legislation gives you the mandate to make a decision and to put a proposal out, which is your proposal. So you through this process that we've been through make a proposal, and that is what is consulted on, which is similar to what happens under other local government requirements. The status quo is part of the background, and if people submit on the proposal and there is significant opposition to the proposal, for example, and people would prefer to have the status quo, then that can be, that may trigger appeals or objections to the process, and they would automatically then be referred to the Local Government Commission, who would have a look at those submissions. But you also have the opportunity at your hearings and deliberations on the submissions to consider all of the feedback from the community. You can make a decision either to stick with your proposal or to make a change to your proposal. So you may consider any feedback that calls for retention of the status quo, for example, and make a decision on those lines if that was the council's wish through the deliberations process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Sunwell.
Thanks. I see section 31 notes that there was early engagement with territorial authorities in Mana Whenua. Just wondering what feedback we did receive at any stage, at any level from those groups.
Yeah, sure. So we received staff feedback from QLDC that talked to the numbers in the Dunstan ward being significantly outside of the recommendations, and that they would like to see additional representation in that central Otago area is needed. They talked about potentially having a separate ward or constituency, or at least adding some further councillor representation to that area. There was some staff feedback from a Dunedin perspective that they value having 6 Dunedin councillors at this point in time. So that was also received. We didn't receive any direct feedback from Runaka through the early engagement process, but it's also been a part of mana to mana discussions, keeping them in the loop.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. And yeah, just recognising obviously that territorial councils would have a governance view as well, and that councils will have a chance to give feedback at the formal consultation time. But I guess, conversations at this point inland would probably be politically separating districts isn't really favoured. They'd probably rather have existing Dunstan boundaries, is what I've heard. Yeah. Okay, which, groups 2 districts, obviously, but anyway, separating, say, Queenstown and Wanaka or Cromwell from Central Otago isn't favoured at this point, but that isn't a formal feedback. Councillor Metham.
Just following up on the question around status quo, from what I understand, we can't actually leave it as it is. The difference from the quota in Dunstan requires a change. Is that correct?
That certainly gives the council a significant impetus to make a change because of that. You could, there was always the option to go out with a proposal that does not meet the plus or minus 10% requirements, but you have to make an argument as to why that should be justified, and that can be for grounds that are set out in the Act, which we've talked about, of not splitting communities, of keeping communities together, and to ensure effective representation. But there is a significant gap between the current status and the plus or minus 10% requirement, and that is really a key driver. And I think good practice would be to look for ways to ameliorate that difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Laws.
I just want to go back to the Murray Ward issue. I've just had a look at the Local Electoral Act, section 19Z. Is your advice predicated on the basis that we would want to establish a Maori ward? Because that wasn't the question I was asking.
I'll just note that if this is getting quite technical as well, we can either take an adjournment, so you can have a bit of a.
Oh, I don't want you to do that, but it's just that.
No, I'm just offering it to Stephen rather than. But if you've got an answer, that's all good as well.
I'll certainly look up the relevant legislation, but the key provision is that there was a specific time frame for councils to consider the establishment of Māori wards or constituencies. And the deadline for that was the 23rd of November last year. So that was the cut-off date, past which you don't have another opportunity to consider establishment of Māori constituencies until the next electoral cycle. That was the date that was put into the Act.
No, I agree with you. But that's not the question I asked. The question I asked is, if we're going to go out and consult on representation issues, why aren't we consulting on a Māori ward? What you're talking about and the advice that you've provided is if the regional council wanted to establish a Māori ward for this coming local body election.
Do you understand the question clearly?
Do you want me to explain again?
Yeah, perhaps
We're
if
wondering
you
what are you aiming with this question? Is
Okay,
it
we're going out to the public to consult with the representation arrangements for the region. There is nothing that stops us in the Local Electoral Act from consulting on a Māori ward. I believe the advice is given on the basis that we are wanting to establish a Māori ward prior to the next election, which is where section 19Z 3A applies, as we've just been advised. It doesn't relate to the consultation that MiWai might want to have on that issue prior at the same time that we're consulting on representation arrangements.
I think you have to take into account that what the scope of this consultation on the representation review is what is the council's proposal. So the consultation is on what the council is proposing, having gone through all of the considerations that it has to date. The council is making a proposal, and that is the proposal that is being consulted on. So matters that are not in the proposal, yes, you may attract feedback and comment, and that's normal and that's likely, but it's not part of what the council would formally be seeking consultation on because it is not part of the proposal, that opportunity having passed as of 23rd of November.
I understand what you're saying, but all I'm saying is if we are going to be formally consulting on representation arrangements, then surely there's nothing that precludes us from also consulting at the same time on whether or not we wish a Māori ward for the Otago region, or wards, plural.
The council may wish to undertake that consultation at some time, but again, that's not within the scope of this consultation.
we made a decision already, which is what you've correctly pointed out just before, not to do that. So yeah, we would need to go back and revisit that decision. I think that's correct. Yeah.
I mean, so I guess one other option is that, the information that goes out for consultation will refer to the fact that the council has not made a decision to establish a constituency, and that may indeed invite or attract feedback and comment from the community. But because it is not something that is being proposed, it's not formally, if you like, within the scope of the consultation.
Understand that. Councillor Metham.
I'm not sure if this is the right thing to say in this question time, but I guess we're sort of getting into a little bit of discussion.
We can leave discussion for pretty soon, but yeah,
we'll clarify this. It will clarify this, hopefully. So if you allow me to, I mean, in terms of Ngāi Tahu, they have been consulted on whether they wanted a Māori ward, and it was end of last year. Ngāi Tahu have said that they did not want a Māori ward. They preferred representation on committees. Thank you.
Yes.
They're irrelevant.
Councillor Malcolm, question time.
I appreciate that it is question time, but
Yeah.
in light of the comment that was made, no other Māori were actually consulted upon, and I'm not,
Correct.
I think, which is what probably Council Laws is referring to. But this particular issue is about our current seating arrangement, constituency arrangement, and how we should progress that. So if Councillor Law wishes to bring the Mary Ward question to the table, he could do that at any stage from now and consult with us councillors, and we will see where that goes.
Yep, that's a good point. Sorry, we are labouring on this and it's not necessarily questions, but yeah, that's right. It's been determined that this is outside of the scope of this consultation, therefore outside the scope of this paper, to be honest. So we can move on from this one at the moment and we're back into questions. Councillor Scott.
Cool. Yeah, Madam Chair, you said before that you had had some feedback that the TAs up in the Upper Lakes would like to retain the various boundaries, which sort of pushes us into one option. And so my question to Amanda is the option of retaining the TA boundaries, the two TA boundaries, one Upper Lakes, one Dunstan.
Just a point of clarification as well, it's up to us to make a decision on
Yeah.
that rather than TAs. Yep.
No, fair enough, but nevertheless, you've mentioned that. And I think, Amanda, you're saying that if we went down that track, the numbers, the plus or minus 10 were exceeded, but do we actually have those numbers yet? Do we? Because it is quite like it's, yeah.
Sorry to jump in. So you're asking if we established an Upper Lakes constituency that took over, that was all of QLDC's territorial authority
Correct.
area, and then a Dunstan ward that was
Yeah.
the CODC area.
Yeah.
Yes, so we presented that as part of a slide deck for the workshop in
That's really-
March. But the numbers, so if you had 12 councillors still and you put two members in the Dunstan constituency, that would be minus 38%, or a 38% difference from the quota. And if you put two councillors in a Whakatipu constituency, it would be 24% above the quota. And then if you changed that to try and say 3 in Whakatipu and 1 in Dunstan, you would get a 17% difference from the quota in Whakatipu and 22% difference from the quota in Dunstan.
Okay.
So it's a challenging population dispersal across those two TA areas. And we also modelled it for 13 councillors. And again, if you went to 13 councillors and had 2 in Dunstan constituency, you'd still be 33% above. If you had 2 in Whakatipu, you'd be 33% below. If you had 2 in Whakatipu, you'd be 34% above.
Okay, so I think the feedback is that is well and truly above the 10%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, are you right now?
Yeah.
Then Councillor Forbes. Okay. Councillor Forbes.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just wondering about the numbers here, and I appreciate the ones that we've had in the workshop, and I've seen those and they are repeated in here in this report, which is great. Thank you very much. But what I'm wondering is how well those numbers anticipate sort of growth that we're facing in those areas, given that the growth is so uneven. So there's huge growth in the Wanaka, Queenstown, Cromwell areas, but less growth in the rural areas. And I'm wondering if they anticipate that. For example, if you took the option which had the 2 councillors in a Whakatipu ward, that would put that ward as overrepresented, not for very long, possibly. Can you explain that a bit more for me, Amanda? I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear there.
How do we take into account forward?
Yes.
I'm going to hand this on to Stephen because it's more of a technical question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're required to deal with current population numbers. There's a set of data that we use that's set by the Commission and Stats NZ, and we do have to use current population. And certainly, it's something you can have in the back of your minds as you're considering and making a decision around what that representation proposal is going to be. but the numbers have to stack up or have to be based on current population. There's some sense in that because obviously nobody can know what's going to happen population-wise over the next 6 years. The projections may well come to pass, but there may be other factors that come into play that don't. So it's important that you base the decision on current population data, but keep in the
It's
back.
like we do for our schools that open overcrowded. Thank you. Okay, that answers it. That's lovely. Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Communities of interest is a rather quaint old-fashioned term these days, I think. It's an irony that our borders represent more or less the 1986 reshuffle. I think, what was it, 89 reshuffled, and there hasn't been much change in that time. The question I have is the priority we give to those factors of communities of interest, effective representation in communities of interest, and fair representation of electors. And if I look around, one of the inequities that I see in representation is the mileage and the to get to an area and an area that has to be covered. 3 constituents in the Molyneux ward or the Moeriki ward or the Dunstan ward is quite different from 3 constituents in the Dunedin ward. Is it a fair? What priority can we give to that C2 unless there are good grounds for exception, which is one that I probably pulled out because of that. Yeah.
Very good point. And again, it's a situation where the legislation uses population as the deciding factor, and that is the basis for where you start that discussion. But as you pointed out, the Commission does allow grounds for going outside the plus or minus 10% if that's necessary, and you consider that it's necessary to achieve effective representation or to ensure that communities are not inappropriately split or inappropriately joined together. So there are grounds there for going outside that plus or minus 10%, but there is no provision in the Act to factor geographic size into the initial assessment.
Yeah.
Councillor Somerville.
If we are ready to, I would be ready to move the recommendations and one of the options if we're up for that.
Which? Yep, we didn't have any other hands up for questions, so yep.
Okay, well, look, I would be moving option 1, which is, of course, retaining the current boundaries, but moving to 5 representatives in Dunedin constituency and 4 in Dunstan. So,
thanks, Councillor Somerville. Does he have a seconder?
Yeah, comfortable to
Councillor
second that.
Malcolm. Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Somerville?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, the geography of Otago, I think, makes the communities of interest issue a very difficult one to resolve. And there's all sorts of different things you can do, and I think none of them are perfect. So this is one of the situations where there is not a very clear answer, and it's to work out which is the best. And having listened to the discussion, the information we've had, we've read the paper and been to taken on the information from the previous workshops, I believe this one is, with no change to the boundaries, is our best option to take. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Somerville. Anyone else like to speak to it? Sorry, Councillor Lords, you're next.
Yeah, listen, I endorse all those remarks just made. There are no perfect options, and you just do your best with the geography and the population where they're going. This is the most common sense solution. I have some sympathy for where Councillor Forbes is coming from in terms of a separate constituency, particularly around the Upper Lakes area. But the growth in Cromwell tends to diminish that particular issue, and Cromwell has perhaps just as much community of interest with Alexandra and the rural areas as it does with the Wanakas and the Queenstowns of this world too. The only question I would raise, and I do think needs to be, is where Mosgiel goes. It's still a question of, I think, a little bit of gerrymander there in terms of the current boundaries. I think Mosgiel sees itself as very much part of Dunedin rather than part of its own constituency. And I just want to raise that issue formally with you, and I think that we need to extensively consult on that, and particularly with the Mosgiel community. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Laws. Councillor Weir, then, Forbes, you had your hand up just before, and then Scott.
You don't normally hear me echo Councillor Laws's points, but that's exactly what I was going to say as well. Yeah, I think the most problematic thing that I find with option 1 is the inclusion of Mosgiel splitting it from Dunedin. I think there are sort of uncomfortable splits throughout and in any boundary setting that you're going to do, but that one does stick out to me as something to, even if it's not through this process, look at in any future reviews. I would probably be more in favour of just looking at shuffling boundaries around to get a more precise number balance and have very little overs and unders. But out of the options presented today, I'd be happy to go with option 1 as it's presented. Good.
Thanks, councillor Weir. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. I feel that we're not taking a future focused look to this. Certainly the future focus in this is only 6 years, so it's not disastrous. I do think that we aren't fully recognising the real burgeoning urban centre we have happening at the head of the lakes. I'm not going to buy in a ditch over this. I'm not going to win it. So that's all right. I will let this one go. I won't be voting for option 1. I will be very interested to see in the feedback that actually comes back from community. That it'll be interesting to watch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, councillor Forbes. Councillor Scott, and then Wilson.
Yeah, cool. I haven't quite made up my mind, whether I'm going to vote for option 1 or not, but I've certainly got reservations about it. It's in terms of the Upper Lakes, I echo what Councillor Alexis had to say. To me, the challenge is we need to get some representation from. We've had one councillor from Queenstown. We've yet to have a councillor from Wanaka. Just by incrementally increasing from 3 to 4 in Upper Lakes, I just don't know if that's going to achieve it. I think the ideal for me would be to have a separate QLDC boundary. Now that doesn't stack up percentage-wise, so I've tended towards option 2. I also, I've thought a bit about the Mosgiel situation, and I think the reality is there's pros and cons, whether it's absorbed into Dunedin or whether it remains in the Molyneux. Mosgiel, for example, has that connection to the Taieri, but it obviously has a connection to Dunedin, and the Taieri is a significant rural catchment. Anyway, I still haven't made up my mind which one I'm going to vote, but I do have reservations about the option 1. I suspect I'll vote against it.
Councillor Wilson, then Malcolm.
I think we had a clear message that the Mosgiel Taieri people don't think they want to pay length rates, so I'm taking that as their submission on this matter, perhaps. Look, I'm going to support this, not because it's the right thing to do, because it's very few options actually in this. I think we're actually looking at it completely, unfortunately, because the regulations require us around the wrong way around, and it's not about getting the numbers right. The numbers, when it comes out to going to election, it is absolutely for Queen 1 and Wanaka to get elected by the very nature of anyone putting their name up who may be a very good candidate but is not well known and is available to do the job, because getting right round that huge Dunstan ward is huge. That is where it matters about the size, and it matters about getting out in it. And we're skewing it when you have those very, very large wards. The functionality of this council is limited by the ability of rural representatives to spend more time in Dunedin than the Dunedin representatives spend outside. And that is the functionality of the problem that limits the representation and the ability of people to come and sit around this table. And that is why it is a fraught process. And until we've taught that functionality of us being better able to effectively sit around the table with our colleagues, but everyone having to do that, and leave their homes to do that, then I don't think we are going to have be afforded the diversity around the table that we may hypothetically want. So anyway, I'm going to vote for it, but it's fraught, it's not perfect, and we're not going to get it perfect until I think we've changed some things around the table here.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, when looking at these boundaries, I'm looking clearly at the environmental issues that we have our authority over, or that is our role. And when I do simply look at Mosgiel, they are front and centre when it comes to the Taieri flood and drainage system. That's their main centre of influence. They, I suppose, are fortunate that they can get a bus over the hill, but in reality, if we're looking at environmental issues, they are clearly linked to the Taieri Plains and to that ward. There has been, I think it was 3 terms ago, there was a councillor from Wanaka, and I think there might have been 2 councillors actually from Wanaka in that time frame. So it's a shame that she's not remembered. And if we look at the Dunstan constituency, what I am very mindful of by keeping it as a whole is what I do not want to see is boundaries that are designated to high urban areas, because that does not represent the greatest part of our environment. So I'm very comfortable. I really do understand, and especially after having time in Queenstown again the other day, I understand those pressures that are coming up there, but I'd rather have 4 councillors being pushed into that area to ensure those environmental issues are looked after. So I'm very much in favour of number 1, and Mulraki will continue to be one in a vast area, but we'll get by and keep helping ORC have a good environment as best we can.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Indeed, you've probably got the toughest job as a sole councillor. Right, Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I'm probably a fan of option 3, but I can live with option 1. Always a useful process to go out to the community and actually find out what our ratepayers really think. Why my thoughts are focused on option 3 is that I see, and actually as recently as this morning when we had the regulatory report, Queenstown topped most of the numbers game in terms of compliance issues, consents, etc. So there is a lot of, as Councillor Malcolm has alluded to, this is about environmental issues, but it's also about delivery of public transport, and the challenging transportation issues in Queenstown seem to require a far greater input from this organisation, and it's understandable with the considerable growth, and the resident population has doubled on a daily basis by way of visitors. So there are lots of challenges in the transportation space and environmental space, and that's probably only going to increase going forward. After saying all of that, I can live with option 1. Thank you.
Councillor Metham.
Yes, I don't have a really firm opinion either way. I think that fair representation is important, and obviously Dunstan needs another councillor. So I'll support 1, but I'm also interested in understanding how Mosgiel residents feel about being part of the Molyneux ward. So in terms of the consultation process, I'd be interested to see if they favoured retaining Molyneux or becoming part of Dunedin.
Councillor Callagher.
Thank you. Yeah, I will support option 1. I think it's the most logical option, that's the closest to the numbers, and the numbers are the parameter we have to work to. I don't buy into the nonsense that you need to be proportionately spread across an area like the Dunstan constituency, where you might target to have one or two in certain areas because of urban density. I think that when you sign up or put your name forward to be a councillor and suffer your way through an election, then you need to be prepared to drive all over your constituency, and you need to be aware of issues everywhere, and you need to be prepared to then bring all that to Dunedin. And you also need to be prepared to play a part across the other constituencies of Otago as well. So at large across the Dunstan constituency makes sense for me. It's always going to be a challenge to get people who want to take on that level of effort, because it is a big effort, but it's a big effort in the other constituencies too. So option 1 for me. Thank you.
Okay. I think everyone's had a chance to speak if they wanted to. I think Councillor McCall might be the only one that hasn't, but he hasn't got his hand up, and myself, yeah, that's right. So I'm just checking to see if Councillor McCall wants to speak, but doesn't look like it. So yeah, I support option 1. Yeah, Councillor Keller had portrayed some of the issues with that Dunstan constituency, which is a large one and covers a diversity, I suppose, of some of the fastest growing area in New Zealand, with some really extensive farming, broad landscapes as well. So yeah, I think in terms of the risk of not getting representation in Queenstown and Monaco, actually there'd be a far greater risk of not getting representation in that rural part of the Dunstan constituency. ORC has got quite a presence in inland for a whole range of reasons, from that more farming, rural focused area, a lot of profile there, through to the PT and hazards and urban development. What else in Queen? Oh, large environmental projects. We've got quite a presence, and I think have been drumming up people standing for that area in recent years even more. So I liked what Councillor Keller has said about representing that whole area if you are a representative, and agree that Mosgiel is a bit of an anomaly. It could go either way. It could go to Dunedin, definitely. It could go to its catchment, which is the Taieri. So there's arguments both ways. I support option 1. I think that yeah, basically we do need to recognise the growth inland, and that Dunedin isn't growing at the same rate, and we need to adjust as a council and represent our communities fairly across the region. So that's what I think we should be going out on, but we need to be open to what we hear back from the consultation. So we're just putting out a proposal at this point. Really keen to hear what communities have got to say. We're not making up our minds on where we're going through this. We just want to point that out as well and ensure that communities feel that we will listen, whatever our proposal is we put out. Okay, Councillor McCall has something he's put up, but he needs to speak if he wanted to say something. So he hasn't got his hand up. Okay. Councillor Somerville, write a reply.
Thanks. Look, I appreciate what everyone has had to say. I think it's really clear that there would be advantages and disadvantages in whatever proposal we came up with, but I really do believe that this is workable and the best one that we have to work with for now.
Thank you. Okay, well, do I need to separate these out? Maybe I will. We'll do number 1 first, which is receiving this report. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Option 2 is progress the preferred option, which is option 1. And yeah, we're all clear on what we're voting on. So we'll put that all in favour. Aye. Against.
Against.
So I've heard Councillor Forbes and Councillor Scott. Would you like your votes recorded? And if I've missed anyone, let me know. So I can't hear you, Alexa, first of all.
Sorry, no, it doesn't matter. Doesn't need to be recorded.
Okay, Councillor Scott. Right, anyone else that voted against?
I've got a question after.
Oh, right, okay, so yep, we've got, that has passed anyway. And what's the question?
Given that the 4th of September is the submission proposal thing, and the final proposal is to be adopted by the Wednesday the 25th, if there are submissions, we need a hearings process. At what point will we be considering setting up a hearing process?
We've got to bring the initial proposal back for the June meeting to be notified,
And
so
that
we'll
will
also
have
bring seek direction on who would be participating in that process, but I understand for most council, it's normally a whole of council hearing process, so it would be everybody listening, hearing those submissions and then making recommendations.
No, that's fine, it's just that the timing, I just want to, it's cool.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Stephen, for all your work to this point and ongoing work with us. Thank you, and to Amanda as well. Right, back to the beginning of the agenda, which is the chair's report. Yeah, there's quite a big time frame there. So there's some letters, formal letters from and to ministers attended, and a rundown of events that I've attended that perhaps other councillors didn't attend. So just for your information there. Any questions? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks. Sorry, I couldn't find the hand and the agenda all at once. I really liked your comments about the Hydrological Society technical workshop, and the comment about Nick Bryans talking about the council's lake boys. And I wondered if there was any way we could get that presentation that he did, presumably there was some sort of presentation, and have that made public, because I actually get a lot of questions about those lake boys, and I think people are really interested in how they work, and it would be amazing to see something like that available for people to look at, necessary, if they wanted to.
Yep, we can arrange for that presentation to be made public and share it with councillors, but also put it up on the website. We'll just have a look to see if there needs to be any sort of supplementary information with it to explain what's in the presentation.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Denise will look after that. We're directly with Nick.
Perfect. Yeah, it was a there was a slide pack, and it was quite highly visual, but yeah, really well received. And I actually hadn't understood myself what was actually involved in creating these things bespoke. And yeah, it's quite groundbreaking technology. So yeah, we should be really proud of it. Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, Councillor Forbes. All right, well, is the other actually, oh, sorry, Councillor Malcolm.
Just
Yep.
you attended the second meeting in Wellington. I'm just so that's on page 62, and there was comments made by the minister regarding farm plans and their intent to come back before they came out with the farm plans to consult to make sure they've got it set in the right framework. But his general comments was about around the need for farm plans being on a risk-based approach. And to me, that really signals that, and talking about catchment bases and the risks of each catchment. So the key to me, I suppose, with that is going to be that we're certainly going to be very it's going to be very important at Otago not to have global FMU descriptors, but really quite in-depth catchment-based descriptors. And so I'm just probably wondering where we are sitting at the moment with our current farm plan work, knowing that it's stalled, and what signals we are working to that have been given to us?
So we're involved in or staff are involved in discussions with Ministry for the Environment staff who are looking into the farm plan program under Minister Hogarth's direction. So we are aware, and there's still not absolute clarity over what changes to the system may be made. You're right that the Minister has strongly indicated more of a risk-based approach than potentially the blanket requirements for farm plans across a region within a certain timeframe. I guess the detail that comes out of the changes is what we need to understand what changes there may be from the current catchment risk, catchment values and context document that we've prepared for North Otago. So we've got an example, but before we go and address those in other parts of the region, we just need to see whether there will be any changes made to the any legislative changes made to that would require us to go back and revisit that. So we don't want to go too far down the path, but we've got a model, thanks to the engagement we had in North Otago, that will work really well.
Yep.
We just need to see that detail before we commit any further resource to it. So I think the approach around having good catchment context, good information to drive the risk assessment and therefore the actions, my sense is that will largely remain. I think what the Minister's looking for is to remove that blanket requirement for farm plans for everybody over a certain time period and allow councils to do that on a more risk-based approach, and also looking for greater efficiencies in the system so that can remove some of the cost in terms of the preparation and administration and have that money spent on actions and on farm changes that will improve water quality.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to move your report.
Oh, thank you. Just to note it, and before we do, I just want to say publicly how fantastic it was to attend the Balanced Farm Environment Awards, and a huge congratulations to Angus Barr and Tara Dwyer from the Wandle and the Strathtyre. Yeah, fantastic to see the amazing efforts that were going on there that enabled that property to be awarded not only our water quality award but also the regional winners. So yeah, really nice to be able to attend that event, which was humming. It was full, that room. It seems to get fuller and fuller each year. I think it was the 20th year as well, anniversary. And yeah, thanks to other councillors that attended as well. I saw Councillor McCall and Wilson and Noon there. So great to see you all coming along as well. Just, yeah, such a great occasion for our primary sector, and it's a diverse one in Otago too. So great to see from viticulture through to sheep and beef and dairy, and what else we got, orchards there. It's a really diverse region, and we're getting people putting their hands up. It's been quite a tough season, but putting their hands up and saying, yep, I'm a leader in the environmental space, which is a big thing to do in itself. And yeah, we're really proud of those people in Otago, so it was great. Thank you as well to everyone in the community that's been participating in the LTP, long-term planning process to date, whether you came to drop-in sessions or you've made a submission, and we've just gone through formal hearings, a couple of days of them, and just, yeah, it's been really good. So just noting that, and a big thanks to Councillor Malcolm for leading us through that process, and no doubt that will keep going as we move into deliberations. And we do a meeting on the 26th of June where the plan is hopefully adopted. So yeah, we're moving on in LTP. A number of other things there, but I just wanted to point those out. And yeah, just I suppose also at this point to thank staff for what has been, it's been a wee while between chairs reports, and to Richard and the team. It's it's been a really busy time as we move through LTP and in our planning, and basically right throughout all of our areas of council, public transport, you name it. It just gets bigger and bigger each year, and the leadership that our staff are showing and dedication is really to be admired. So thank you for supporting our council with high quality papers, and yeah, I really appreciate it myself as well. So thank you. Somebody was going to move this report. No, question, Councillor Wilson.
Just about the biodiversity, in your report you talked about meeting Minister Hogarth, and I'd just like to tease it out slightly about other issues. And we heard yesterday a very compelling argument for deer being raised up as issues in pigs and goats in the Catlins. And I know how hard it is to do a review of the regional pest management plan, or even slightly simpler changes in there. The question is, where are deer or pigs or any other species other than wild conifers in his radar? Have you had discussions, and is there an opportunity, and is he open to having discussions about potential New Zealand-wide programs for some of those species?
Thanks. It's always a tough one to speak on behalf of a minister, so I won't do that. But
Sorry.
No. So at the regional sector, he did particularly mention deer and pigs, and that was on the radar as a quite significant national issue now. So yeah, well aware of that, and was open to hearing feedback or advice. First of all, why it's happening, and second of all, what could be some solutions, because it's something that has really skyrocketed. That's right, it's different from how it was before, and to understand this space is important. So I don't know where we're at. The minister would be better to answer that in terms of a national type response. But yes, we do probably need to have a think about where to next for those areas that potentially are problems. We need to understand, I guess, the scale of the problem or not as well would be a first one. Yeah.
I suppose it's the subsequent question is, and maybe it's for the CEO on this, is that certainly on the ground I'm hearing that in every area is as bad as the 1970s in some areas, if not everywhere. So I'm not quite sure, do we need data from our staff, or do we need to be moving a motion at some stage, or we can do it in the long-term plan, or we can do it at a EI meeting maybe tomorrow. But yeah, where is the appropriate time to consider a different action on that? I'm not sure where it happens.
So I would suggest that's part of the broader conversation on the regional pest management plan. So we currently have that, and we're resourced to deliver on that plan. We don't have resources for work specifically on deer and pigs and goats. I'm well aware of the same conversations, and we've heard them through submissions, and we hear them at community meetings, and I know councillors are getting contacted directly by your constituents around these issues. So there'll need to be some decisions made. We know that the regional pest management plan is not due for a full review, so there's for a number of years, but there are opportunities to bring that forward if that's the desire of the council. I would say that there's a paper on the operational plan tomorrow. That again is not, this conversation is outside the scope of that plan, but it's more closely related to that. So I think we can have a discussion about it tomorrow, and then talk about how the council may want to respond to the challenges, because it's not currently in our budget or our resourcing plan.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Good question. And yeah, good answer there as well, in terms of we can come back to this one tomorrow, but yeah, the issue's not going away. So yep, thank you. Right, someone wanting to note that was, or you wanted to ask?
Kevin moved and I seconded.
Cool.
The report be noted.
Thank you. We'll put it then. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. On to the Chief Executive report.
Thanks, Gretchen. So similar report to previous. Obviously, the project plans are getting shorter as we get closer to delivery date. But if we start with or just in the order they're there. So the land and water plan is a separate paper on that updated program that was discussed at the public workshop last week, and there's another paper today to receive that program, but I've included the project plan, which builds in that additional 4 months. So that's in there. And milestones are on track, albeit as we discussed last week, even with that 4-month extension, it's still tight because of the RPS work and the clause 3 work that staff are looking to complete. Long-term plan has progressed well, and obviously we had 50 submitters over 2 days, Monday and Tuesday this week, which was good, and another 400 odd submissions that everybody's working through ahead of deliberations, which are due next week. So again, remains on track for the June 26th adoption date. Financial performance, I think worth flagging there that we are showing 3.7 million favourable against budget, but that's largely a phasing issue, and some of our larger expenditure that hasn't been received or hasn't been receipted yet, but will be before year end, means that we are forecasting to year end a surplus of around the 800k mark. So there are some challenges we have every year in terms of how we phase those budgets, and at the moment there are some significant expenditure through a number of our areas that hasn't been goods receipted, so it's not showing on the books, but the forecasting is showing that we will still run a surplus to year end, but it's still being managed carefully by staff. And then that last attachment and around the level of service measures. So again, as we get closer to year end, we're starting to see where we are going to struggle to deliver some of our community service or community measures that were included in the annual plan last year. So we're starting to flag those in that report, and you'll see through that attachment that there's a few of those that, while significant progress has been made, they won't meet the date set in that plan, and therefore they are red and not achieved as far as the audit process is concerned in the annual report. So that's how we report them, and there's a few that are still tracking orange that we will be doing our best to complete before year end, but again we'll update those month on month. So those are the 4 attachments. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Wilson.
And you can tell me to bring my questions up in the next section if that's what we prefer. On the land and water plan, and paragraph 7, you said the additional 4 months provided by council will enable careful consideration of the recently released RPS statement decision and greater assessment of clause 3 consultation to factor this into the draft plan. Thank you. What I just want to understand in that process, and having looked forward at our calendars and what matters are coming up, it appears to me that in the context that staff may well have known what was happening in the RPS, when we had our workshops post clause 3, but before the RPS landed, we were not in a position of understanding the context and the changes that may have been needed. And my mind, certainly when I was asking that, hadn't understood what I saw as significant or quite a major change in the RPS. So the question for me is, there are some things that we have already dealt with as assessments but weren't informed by the RPS. Will we have any chance to have any discussions on those in light of the RPS?
So there was discussion on the RPS public workshop last week, and there's another workshop coming up next week. So that's the opportunity for discussion on those issues.
They've got issues already identified. If there are issues that were in the past workshops that I attended one of them, but that I didn't know the decision of the RPS at that time, so I wasn't in the yes.
So if you think there's significant issues that the RPS is impacting that haven't been included on the proposed topics for the workshops, then let us know.
Okay, thank you.
And we will have a look at how that might be addressed.
Okay, and the only other question I had was on the Maori economy report completed by ORC and EBRI, which sounds one that I've been looking forward to seeing. It isn't now. It looks like 14th of June, maybe it's before that, and needs to be completed by the 16th of June for the consultation on clause 4A. I'm just wondering the implications for that for the section 32, if it's not in time for that, and how that fits together.
So it will need to be received by then to be incorporated into that, into the section 32. So that's what staff are working with the authors on, just to ensure that everyone's clear on what those timeframes are. what timeframe think you need for it to be included in that, and then also obviously, as you pointed out, clause 4A.
Councillor Mekong.
Oh, Richard, just looking at the performance reporting exceptions for the activity, this is on our annual plan. You've made the point that we're getting close to the end of the year, and you know, and that there may be some teams or some activities that are struggling to be delivered. I'm noticing, and this is an observation, that this chart is colouring up as we get closer, and that could indicate a few things. One of the things it may indicate is that we're not getting the right information coming through early for this report, knowing what the status is on some of these milestones. But as we get closer to the end of the year, all of a sudden we're becoming aware that we're not going to achieve these outcomes. So all it is an observation. Just wanted to pass that through.
Yeah, I think the well, my experience is it does tend to happen this way. I'm not saying it's right. It just tends to be what happens. There's sort of best endeavours made right through the year to hit some of these milestones, and for large parts of the year, we remain on track, and then obviously it only takes a slight delay in a report, or you know, we miss a council meeting round or something, and then it technically won't meet the audit requirement because we may end up reporting it in July or August. But no, it's a fair observation in terms of, you know, we should be tracking these closely given they're the commitments that we're making through our planning processes. And if we are going off track, we should be looking at what we might need to do to bring it back on track.
Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, just on page 84, which is emergency management, one of our descriptors is adequate staff who are trained and available for any activation of our ECC. And that now has gone into at risk. And just the comment is more training courses are available for ORC staff to attend. Again, this is contingent on staff availability and willingness to attend. So I just wonder, what are the issues around that, and has that been addressed, and will that yellow go back to green?
Yeah, good one to raise, Councillor. So there has been some challenges with staff available. So the ORC staff, obviously we've got our core civil defence staff, but we rely on the ORC staff to staff our emergency coordination centre in the event we activate it. We've got a number of staff who are trained, but we need to continue to bring more people or induct more people into that process and have them carry out the necessary training. We have had some challenges with commitments required for the training. So there is a reasonable level of training required to be considered adequately trained to respond in an event. We had a paper brought by SEDM staff at the executive leadership team probably about a month ago, looking at this issue and how we could ensure it as an organisation we were creating space for those staff to enable them to attend that training. So it was often just a prioritisation issue because we've got so much other work happening. But we have made that commitment to Matt and the team that we will, as an executive, prioritise that, look for opportunities to bring staff in and have them trained. So I'd be confident that would get back to green.
And so you're comfortable we've given you the right tools in your toolbox to make that happen?
Yes.
Thank you.
No other questions? There's not. Thank you very much for the report. We just need to note. Just noting again the report. So I can move that. Somebody want to second it? Councillor Weir, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we're on to 10.1, updated project plan and key milestones for notification of land and water regional plan by 31 October. Welcome, Anita. And Fleur online, welcome. So, you'll see that there are some key milestones at paragraph 7 there. Sorry, Anita, you probably want to introduce this one, but also just noting that we have made a decision as council to, some resolutions previously, and one was that we were Yeah, preparing this work program and bringing it back, and we have agreed that the work program works towards the 31st of October. So yeah, this paper is on the work program. Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Oh, sorry, I'll go to Anita actually,
absolutely fine.
yeah, and then we'll come back to questions. Thank you.
So I'll just add one comment. So this timeline was presented last week at the workshop. But one thing is not in the timeline, which is an additional briefing following the cause 3 feedback that we will include. It's just not on here because the paper was signed off, so that will be added in between the 25th of August and the 17th September, date to be confirmed.
Is it clause 4A?
Yes. Did I say 3? Sorry, clause 4A.
Councillor Wilson.
And again, apologies. A higher level question about freshwater farm plans, appreciating that's on the 28th of May, but I'm not quite sure at what level that is. Given that the government is pausing that at the moment, how does that affect the ability to write? And so this is a high level question, it's not what we put in farm plans or the alternative pathway, but the ability to reference farm plans in the land and water plan. If that hasn't been bedded down by the 31st of October, can you just understand that at a high level?
Yeah, so interestingly, there was a similar situation in Southland where there was a proposal for a national level farm plan type system, and I can't remember what it was called, and an appendix was held open and blank for that on the anticipation it would be filled through a hearing process, and it didn't manifest and it disappeared. At the moment, we can still refer to the freshwater farm plans because they exist as a thing in statute and legislation. But if they disappear, then we can't. So there is some questions for you as a council, because obviously we've got a lot of permitted activities that rely on activities being managed through a freshwater farm plan as an alternative. So once we've got some clarity on that, we will need to just continue to watch that policy direction and see what happens. But while they exist in statute, we can still refer to them.
Oh, that's great. Are the government giving us some timeframes? It'd be good to understand what those timeframes are, if they are, whether they hold themselves to account is a different matter. But do we have any idea about those timeframes that are coming with all the legislative changes? And thank you, CEO, for sending us some data the other day.
My understanding is the original timeline was for May for the stock exclusion, freshwater farm plans and fence winter grazing changes. So in the next week or so, haven't heard any change to that, but I haven't seen anything like that. So
that was stock exclusion, intensive winter grazing and farm plans. Thank you.
Other questions? Yep, Councillor Noon.
I was just following up on Anita's comment about the update to governance on the 4A consultation. All I would say would be if it was going to be on the 16th of September, don't worry about it. But if it would be useful to have it a week in advance. And I just was hoping that you'd be able to provide that sort of time frame.
yes, absolutely. We'll try to get it as close to the 25th of August as we can. But it won't be the 25th of August, and it will depend on how much feedback and how many changes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Malcolm's on his button. Yep.
You're just going back to, so after clause 4A feedback and updating, it was that the same question Councillor possibly has asked them, where before you go into your final formatting and finalising your LWRP on the 26th of August, when will we get to see those tracked changes so we can understand what changes you have made and why you're making them?
So for the chair, yeah, that is the same question that Councillor Noon asked last week. So that'll be the briefing that we are yet to schedule. It's not shown in here, but we will schedule that to occur.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. You're count these questions or moving?
I'm moving.
You're like signalling you want to move. Councillor Scott will do first.
Can the general public understand what's actually written here in terms of RPS, ESP, LWRP, 632, clause 4A, clause 3.
I think through the chair that we can expand on some of the acronyms such as ESP and add, for example, section 32 RMA so that people can go to the legislation to find it. I think that's a useful addition. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Always good to keep that in mind. Councillor Mepham, you are wanting to move something, is that right?
I'd just like to move the recommendation.
Does he have a seconder? Councillor Ware, would you like to speak to that, Councillor Mepham?
No, just to acknowledge the work programme that's been put together and the dates that tie in with the notification. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak to this? It appears not. So we will put that. Everyone's clear what they're voting on. All in favour? Aye. Against?
No.
Would you like it recorded?
Oh, yes, please.
No worries.
Bold. Aye.
It has passed. Thank you, everyone. We're on to 10.2, and it is regional, another really important paper. Regional Council's functions and responsibilities in relation to natural hazards. Welcome, team. So we have Amber and we have Jean-Luc joining us, and we have Simon Anderson as well joining us if we have any legally related questions. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So yeah, this paper came about, I believe, because councillors have asked a number of times what specifically are our roles, and as you can see there, they fall under a number of tranches of legislation and also under a number of areas, right through from preparedness through to response. So yeah, this is a really good paper. Thanks for bringing that, and no doubt will spark some discussion and some questions. But is there anything that you want to touch on as well to introduce the paper?
I think we're happy to take paper as read. The reason we've brought it is exactly as you've outlined. Just to qualify, I had committed to Councillor Malcolm and Wilson I'd get legal advice in the paper and couldn't do that. So we've gone one better and brought the legal advice into the room. So, so apologies that I didn't manage to get it in the paper in time.
Excellent. So right into this, everyone's read their paper, and if they do have any questions, now's your chance. We've got a whole team of experts here. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm going to go through a number of questions, but the first one is paragraph 18 talks about ORC's LiDAR data, which provides a geospatial data set that assists flooding, fire mapping, and managing natural hazards, be it flooding, erosion, or landslips. And I did email General Manager Dr. Palmer last week about that. Otago doesn't have a full coverage of LiDAR, and just wondering if we've got an idea of when that work may be happening or programmed, because at least some areas correct.
Yeah, so we've proposed in the draft long-term plan to have that work starting in year 3, 4, and 5, I think. But that's assuming we get support from central government, similar to what they've done in the last 2 years to cover the coastal areas and the central Otago catchment.
Thank you. That I think it's been a change of government, so it's going to be an interesting one, and I hope that we're again advocating for that well and have that on the radar. That's good, but it's a highly necessary. So how reliant are we on the LiDAR to do that identification?
You mean the what type of identification? The general hazards.
Yeah, the geospatial. Yeah.
It's key data to anything related to water, because it basically tells you how high the land is. But it's also key information for geologic hazard. However, the funding in the long-term plan is to capture the full region.
Yeah.
that doesn't stop us having smaller areas that we can capture data for specific project. For example, we are currently looking to capture specific data for the Makarora area after the debris flow event that we had in September last year. So although the wider capture is planned for the future, we still have ability to capture small scale data to inform those specific studies. So we're not waiting for years 3, 4, and 5 to get the data, to get our work. It's
We're choosing to prioritise some areas over
Yes.
others because we know of a known issue, but we don't know what we don't know because we don't have the table covered. Interesting, thank you. I'll do another question like that.
Councillor Malcolm then Scott.
Yeah, look, just on page 95, and this goes back right to the regional councils role and regulations. The RMA requires regional councils to control the use of land for the purpose of the avoidance or mitigation of natural hazards. So that's our role. And then we go down to the role of the city and district councils, which the RMA requires city district councils to control the effects of the use of land for the avoidance or mitigation of natural hazards. So there's a subtle difference here. What powers have we got to ensure, so who has got the power, or how do we ensure that the city or district councils are actually doing that part of this procedure?
Well, one aspect is the regional policy statement, which needs to be given effect to in district plans, and that's probably the key regional level policy direction on natural hazards. But you're right, there's a subtle distinction between the powers of a TA under the RMA and the powers of a regional council. And the key point of difference is that the regional council can make a rule which prevents the use of land and also eliminates existing use rights, whereas a district council can't eliminate those existing use rights. So if you think of a scenario where retreat is being proposed, it is only the regional council which can achieve that.
So, can I just follow up on that? Right, that's very clear, actually. So, if so, when would we become aware of something? Is this through a consenting process of what would it be, a notified consent to a TA that we would become aware of, that we would then?
That's another example of a situation where the regional council might exert influence, and the regional council might choose to submit on a consent application, if it's able to, or submit on proposed district plan or variations to a district plan. And that would be on the basis that the regional council wants to ensure that its regional policy statement is given effect to. If you're thinking about the power to prevent land use, that would be a different scenario.
Yeah, good. I do have one more, if that's
okay.
Thank you. So under clause 22, where we are now ready, because I'll push my button. I'm going to get used to this. Brian, you and I need lessons, Councillor Scott, on how to use these microphones, I reckon. That was a training session afterwards. Clause 22 tells us about what we own and what our flood schemes and our banks and everything that we've got in place to look after and protect from natural hazards. So the question really is that if we've developed a scheme to protect infrastructure or people, and we've designed it at a certain capacity and informed people of that's the capacity and that's the level that we will maintain it at. If we don't maintain it at that level, at what stage would we be cut? Are we then putting ourselves in a position of liability for the results of that lack of maintenance?
I don't think I can give a specific answer, but there are a couple of comments which might be useful. So the first thing is where infrastructure has been put in place as it has, the council needs to use reasonable care and skill to maintain it. And in some circumstances, failure to do so could become a liability issue. What you're talking about is a slightly different situation where a certain level or capacity of protection was put in place initially. When the council does that, it is not committing to do so forever, but it is assuming a duty to continue to maintain until a decision is made to change that. So if the scenario is the council's making a decision that for whatever reason protection works are going to be at reduced capacity, it is able to make that decision, but there are some steps that it should take to ensure that people are aware of it. But the council would not want to be in a position where flood protection works were not functioning as intended simply due to a lack of maintenance.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for the floor. Let's move back to my markup. Paragraph, sorry. Yeah, no,
Someone else
sorry, I've got
first?
someone, sorry, I've got
Yeah,
that
we'll
sitting
go
right
with
there.
councillor Known, thanks.
That's it.
I'm going to try and couch a question that's slightly removed from this topic, but yesterday I was contacted by a ratepayer who has been advised by their insurance provider that their insurance premium is going to quadruple for the renewal of the insurance premium. And the reason being, the insurance company said that flood hazard maps are now publicly available through either the LRC website or the DCC website. So I suppose my question is, if some of that work is based on modelling, is there any liable or liability associated with the council? Because obviously the council's got to provide natural hazard information. There are obviously some consequences to that, and if that information is based on modelling, could that potentially be challenged as a reliability risk to the organisation?
It's a good question. So you're right that there is an obligation to identify hazards and to make relevant information publicly available, which has been done with the online ability to look at hazard mapping. An important part of that is to also disclose the basis of that information, to state to what level it's considered accurate or not, i.e. it's the best information we have, but we cannot guarantee that that is how things will actually play out if something happens. And also to make clear that as better information becomes available, mapping will likely change. And if memory serves, and I think I clicked on the database a couple of days ago, before you can access it, you sign a checkbox to indicate that you understand those things. So that is to, I guess, to reduce the risk of liability. I can't sit here and say that it's totally eliminated, because the simple fact, the uncomfortable fact for the council is that when the council does something, whether it's building a flood bank or publishing information, it does need to exercise reasonable care and skill. And in some circumstances, limited circumstances, there may be a duty to a third party which leads to a claim. If it's asserted that there wasn't enough care and skill. But the risk can be reduced and respect.
Useful, thank you.
Sorry, it's councillor Wilson.
No, my paragraph. It's reference to the paragraph 22 of the report, and it's about the readiness. And in that, we talk about the areas in which we do have flood protection and land drainage. And that's fine, and I understand the liability there. If we've identified an area that could flood, and there are a number of them, that we haven't done any work on, but we've informed the community of that risk. And in some ways, we've got less liability, have we? Because we're not taking on that burden of saying we're going to manage it. And I was thinking of the Lindsay in this case, which is part of the water related in some ways.
Short answer, in any individual instance, that could be the case. But I would follow up with saying that this council does have functions, duties, powers under RMA, under the emergency civil defence, emergency management legislation, which includes a positive obligation to identify hazards and to identify cost-effective ways of reducing those hazards. So doing nothing is not a risk-free option, and in fact, doing nothing would essentially be saying we're not going to do what the law says we need to.
Except for in the case where we've looked at what the options are, and if there are no options, or if it's just too expensive, then that's an understandable situation too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The obligation is not to eliminate all risks in all circumstances instantly. And the reference to cost-effective solutions is telling us that we can do cost-benefit analysis and figure out what makes sense and what doesn't.
Yeah. No, that's good. I certainly wasn't trying to take us down a different path. The other question, I thank you, Anita, for giving some legal advice, and sometimes I possibly overthink things, but it occurs to me that we have a function and territorial authorities have tier functions, and that where we may want to work with TAs and hold hands to make it better for the communities, which is an honourable thing to do, it also muddies the waters about who's responsible, and responsibility is if there comes a litigious situation. And that can become really difficult if there are two parties, because each is blaming each other potentially, and it doesn't help the applicant who may be relying on, they weren't quite sure whose information. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yes, and it's a fair comment because, well, as you know, and as this paper shows, that this council has a lot of functions to do with hazards. TAs have some functions. Generally speaking, the TA functions are not separate, they overlap with regional council functions, and so you do have situations where the two, or sometimes three, or if it's the emergency management group, all of the TAs in this council need to cooperate and figure out who's doing what, and what's done jointly and what's not done jointly, and try to be reasonably clear on that. If you're thinking about a particular situation which two councils may be looking at and figuring out, well, how do we deal with this? That is likely to evolve into certain things that a regional council might do and certain things that a TA might do. So, for example, a TA might, one part of the response might be provision in a district plan. Another might be, we need to just get out of this area, which would mean a provision in a regional plan. In rare cases, there may be agreement that there should be an engineered solution. Sometimes that would mean this council, under the Soil Conservation and River Control Act. Sometimes it might mean the other council. So you're right, it's confusing, and I've probably given a longer answer than you really wanted.
Well, and I know it is the nature of the beast, and I think it's really important that we go in with eyes wide open in these and be as clear as possible. So the next question, if I may, is when we take any steps, and adaptation is going to be something that we're going to be doing more and more regularly, I think, is should we be giving that clarity of that role and who's the lead in that so that the processes are really clear as much as we can. Bear in mind, sometimes we will literally be holding hands on the same project together. But to give certainty of where that responsibility lies and why.
I do think, well, in most examples I can think of, when something is actually done, it will be pretty clear who's doing what. So if this council decides to construct a flood bank, it's going to be clear that it's this council doing it. I think it's in the early stages of addressing something where you may have a couple of councils involved in discussions and consultation with a community. But in that context, again, I think it's reasonably clear that both councils are working together. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but those are the things that seem relevant to me.
I think that's possibly the action stage that we need to be clear, and that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to check. Can I just add paragraph 15 to 17? Discuss the roles and responsibility around adaptation and the fact that for the moment there is a lack of clarity and that central government is working on that, try to provide clarity around adaptation, rule it that, how it's going to be funded, role of central government, local authorities into that adaptation work.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. We have Councillor Scott.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sort of continuing in this vein, and I refer to the same paragraph that Kevin referred to. He read it out. The RMA requires regional councils to control the use of land. And because it seems to me that we don't control, okay, you referred to an RPS, but at best we seem to, you used the word influence.
Oh, sorry, your mic as well. That's an important point, I think.
Yeah, so in relation to controlling the use of land, do we really control the use of land?
Short answer, yes, when the council chooses to do so. The position with the RPS is that it must be given effect to in-district plans. And the use of the word influence might have downplayed things slightly, but if this council is submitting on a district plan and it's submitting that there is a provision required to give effect to the RPS, that is this council saying that is what must happen, and that is in fact what the RMA says must happen. So through that mechanism, council does control use of land in the hazard context, and it has the ability, if it chooses to do so, to have its own regional plan rules which make further provision to deal with hazards.
Okay. And in the last sentence where it says, if a regional council does not set out responsibilities for functions relating to natural hazards, then the regional council retains the primary responsibility. Is that a correct sentence?
Yeah. So that's on page
95.
So yes, so that refers to in the RPS, if the RPS doesn't delineate functions, then they all are retained with the regional council.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Happy to move the noting of that report.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Does somebody want to second that?
Yep.
Councillor Callagher. Would you like to speak to that?
Oh, look, thanks very much. It's certainly given me a lot more clarity and a lot more things to think about. So, and thanks for bringing the legal advice to us, but very well done. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak to this paper? Councillor Wilson.
Just note the reference to the LiDAR, and I just want to raise it because I will be raising it potentially next week, is that I think of the urban or semi Fiordland hasn't been done in Southland, and the Southern Alps haven't been done, but generally most of New Zealand where there are people have taken has been actually LiDAR done, except for in Otago, and it does worry me that we are not well set up in that. It has been raised, I think, in something in the last few months has made me go and look at that stuff, and I'm just raising it that we need to do it and whether we're doing it soon enough. And so this stuff is really, really important, that we've got an important role, and I just hope that we're going to be ensuring that we are best preparing our staff to identify natural hazards as best we can. So that's just want to point that out. And support the report.
Yep, and I just wanted to say thank you for pulling this together, and to everyone who's attended today. I see Matt Alley's on line as well, manager of CDEM, and yeah, just outlining as well that we have got a hugely significant role in natural hazards. Often community asks what does the regional council do? Well, this is a hugely significant part of what regional councils do, and that reduction, readiness, response and recovery, all of those are huge. And a lot of that work that we do, the technical work too, and understanding the natural hazards realm, but also the social side as well. And we've been investing in that. And through CDEM as well, working closely with communities. There's a lot involved. Yep, and it's great to see it all so succinctly laid out here, and to come along and willingly answer all of our questions in terms of what is our role. But no doubt people go away and think, gosh, I've probably got more I'd like to know about what our role is in this area, because it is so significant. So if they do have other questions, you can feed them back through Anita and team. And yeah, just a huge thanks for pulling this together. Thanks, Amber, as well. Really appreciate it. So we have the mover and the oh, sorry, actually, did anyone else want to speak first of all, rather than assuming I'm the last one? Okay, doesn't appear to be. We have mover and a seconder there. So we'll put this, it's just noting this report. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm just wondering, they're probably quite, but you think?
I hope so.
Okay. Okay, so the general consensus is we're going to just go for it on the next two papers, and that they shouldn't take too long, and then we can all head back to our various parts of the region, yeah, which might be better than having a break right at this moment. So that's the plan. We'll go into, unless Richard, from a staff perspective, do we need to have a wee break? Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Turn your mic off, Scott.
So yeah, we'll just wait on the team to come forth. And yeah, 10.3 is to adopt council's policy on dangerous flood and earthquake prone dams. Don't get off that lightly. So yeah, welcome along everybody. Great to see you all here today. And to Rebecca Jackson, who I understand is the team leader of Consent Spot, I know, but is also the author of this report. Welcome along, Rebecca. And to Joe and to Peter. So I just wanted to just give a chance to say as well that we've had two panellists on this dangerous dams, flood and earthquake prone dams work, and that actually Councillor Wilson chaired that panel. The paper doesn't explicitly lay that out, but you did, and I feel that it would be appropriate if Councillor Wilson wanted to introduce the recommendations and speak a little bit about the process. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's this was a court process, but thankfully we had voluntary staff leading us on the journey. The reason it was fraught was not because of our staff, it was because we had changes happening during it from above us, and we were happily guided through that process. All of the councils are trying to do this together to make it sensible right across the country. And while it seems like a process that is delegated to us, it has so few options in it that it seems a fraught process. One of the there's two recommendations in the report that we make outside of the scope of the report. One is that should government change things, then actually shouldn't have to reconsult if it's a lesser standard. Because technically, if the government makes something less extreme, you'd have to reconsult. Had we not built that in, we would have to reconsult on the whole process again, in theory, had we not done the word changes we suggested. So that's something that I think we should be asking or considering. And the other one is a technical issue. When you have got a dam, is understanding that people would be notified of that dam in a hearing for something that may make it a dangerous dam below it because of the actions of someone else downstream of it. But that's a very technical issue that came up because of the Phoenix dam and their experience. But those are raised, they don't have to be dealt with today, I don't think. It's just for a matter to highlight. Otherwise, the report covers all the very helpful submissions that were given by our community. We had a number that appeared and they all had good, valuable advice for us. We were limited, however, in our ability to accept most of those points because of the constraints of the legislation itself. I think that, and thanks to the staff for bearing with us as we went through that process.
Did you want to speak about the recommendations you've got around writing to the minister or establishing a process of notification to territorial authorities as well?
But those are the two recommendations we had afterwards, and look, the technical ones, I don't know if the staff want to talk about them, they would understand as much as I do, but it does seem thought that you can have a dam that isn't dangerous, but then a development goes down below and may have a negative effect that may then cause issues. I think I'm articulating that as well as I can. I mean, if you do a whole lot of houses down below a dam, that dam owner doesn't have to be notified about that development happening, which I think is difficult because it's hard to manage something after the and it would be good that those dams weren't able to be notified in that process if it was a notified process and taken into account. But it's beyond the scope of us to actually require it. And the other now it's just dropped out of my head, but I spoke about it before. They're outside the scope. We just wanted to raise some of these issues.
Anything else that we need to say about the recommendations or those ones that are additional ones?
No, I don't think so. No, Councillor Wilson has covered everything really well that Rebecca would have spoken to. So thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, and I know that you wanted to thank the 13 supporters.
I did say that. I said thank you.
Thanks.
Especially those that appeared, they gave us scope to do things as limited as it was.
Brilliant,
Great.
thanks. Rightio, we've got lots of hands up. We'll start with Councillor Metham.
I'm sorry, I might be the only one in the room, but I really don't understand the recommendation 2B. Can somebody explain it further for me, please?
2B is approves Chairperson Robertson to write to government ministers, that one.
Yep. So the requirement is to undertake a special consultative procedure, which is quite a significant process in hearings, and I think what the suggestion from the panel is where those changes are being driven by central government, the direction to go through a full special consultative process seems quite onerous when those changes have to be made anyway. So I think it's worth raising, given that we've got a government that is talking about efficiencies in process and trying to remove some of the cost involved in some of these changes. So there's where we see an issue like this highlighted, I don't think there's any harm in raising it.
So does it have any wider reaching consequences if we adopt?
We could still as a council always choose to go through a special consultative procedure if we felt the issue was significant enough.
Yeah.
But in some cases we're forced to incur those costs in time and process where probably not warranted. So it still leaves council with a choice.
Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah, that's okay. Who else? Councillor Malcolm then Scott.
You will still have a choice to put in a criteria more stringent than if government did make a change. So then we'd probably have to consult on that. But my one is just going back to the doing something below a dam, but if the dam was not actually dangerous, we're not actually, if it wasn't, if the dam is obviously the dam's in situ and it's not dangerous. So I'm just wondering what we would be trying to achieve, because there is greater risk from if that dam does fail, but that risk is surely not the risk of the dam owner, because the dam is already in situ, and the risk is actually to the developer below. So what were we trying to achieve with this extra bit going to the minister? I'm just not sure.
I don't think that was the recommendation to the minister. It was a separate process that we could get involved with the district councils when they are processing applications for down catchment developments.
And it's really ensuring that sharing of information and that all parties are aware of the locations of dams and of developments as well. So really, we're just picking up that additional recommendation from the hearing panel and looking into setting up a process where appropriate.
So I'm thinking of one that we actually did, was party to in Mahino, where people, they built a dam, we scoped out the impact area, then people below started to do something unaware of that impact area. And so that's just, so we were saying there's a mechanism there to make people aware of that, to ensure that, thank you.
Councillor Cal, oh, sorry, it wasn't. It was Councillor Scott next. I don't mean you.
Cool. When Councillor Kate was talking, you said something along the lines, the government ministers requesting the council should not need to go through the special consultation process if their process was of a lesser standard. And I just wonder whether that needs to be included in there as opposed to that generic statement. And that's a question.
I can clarify that. Look, what happened during the process of this, and thankfully we kept the process open because we heard that there may be some changes. We had one criteria. Had we left that criteria in the rule about the height, then and recommended it, and we'd adopted it, the government then came and gave a criteria or reclassified the term, redefined it, which made it a lesser. Less onerous, yeah.
I understand.
And so if we hadn't changed that, we would have had to go right through the whole consultation process if we wanted to go with that lesser standard. And that just seemed madness, forced by a government, yeah.
So my question is, do the words to a lesser standard need to be in there?
Well, if it was.
Because what happens if they come with a higher standard?
It would be imposing more. I think it's where it's not necessarily to a lesser standard, where it imposes less of a duty on landholders. It's probably the way it should be articulated, or something like that.
Yes, my question is, should that explanation?
So no, I don't think it needs to be. I think the recommendation 2B is just to enable or for the council to support the chair writing that so we can make sure it's got the right content.
No, thank you.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. Just to the chair of the panel, I did pick up that the submitters, everything the submitters had, their submissions weren't run with. Will any of them be, will there be any circumstances from what they were submitting on that with the decision arrived at, they will be saying, well, this won't work with us or not? Or was it so broad and high level that it was their submissions were helpful, but wasn't really necessary?
We were limited by the scope of the regulations about what we could change because there was very little room that the council has in changing because the regulations are quite precise and directive.
Right.
So they had some good points, and a large number of them would have been alleviated by the government changes that was happened subsequent to the hearing.
Okay, cool. Second question was around the issue on developments downstream of a dam was raised with me just a couple of weeks ago. And of course, the issue is that a dam owner someone does sits with a classification on their dam currently, and it might be low or medium. Someone does a big development downstream, and suddenly their classification changes because there's a larger risk of loss of life because of the development. An ongoing beef that certainly infrastructure owners have, certainly aligned with the irrigation sector, is that TLAs are absolutely useless, ODT, if you're listening, at advising scheme owners, infrastructure owners, of changes that they approve, and actually leaving infrastructure owners out of processes that they should really be involved in and be submitting on. And these schemes just learn of changes when it's far too late. And this has major implications for these dam owners and what they might have to do, like major implications, and around whether they can fit their dams can function, or the work they may have to do on them. So my question, I'm getting to it, is there any mechanism that ORC as a regional council has to the TLAs to require a greater level of communication and inclusion of dam owners and infrastructure owners in these processes?
I can't think of an answer to that one off the top of my head, certainly, and you will have heard earlier about, it's the first time I've forgotten that.
That was noted.
In terms of our obligations and ability to make territorial authorities do certain things, so the first step for us is looking at that provision of information and how we can get that relationship up and running, and that information is there, and that would be certainly the first step for us. And I'll just pass over to Peter, who's probably got some more detailed questions.
Thanks, Joe. Just a couple of points on that, Councillor. With the dam safety, we call potential impact classifications, or PICs. They're required to be done every 5 years. So if there's a development happens downstream, potentially that will get caught and brought to the dam owner's attention in 5 years. But where the TA might get some advice is where you have a medium or high PIC dam, the dam owner is required to do what's called a dam safety assurance program. And as part of that program, they need to consult with emergency management and also the TAs. So the TAs will get advice of medium and high PIC dams as the dam safety assurance programs get created. They'll be consulted on those particular plans. So there will be some information going towards TAs. Not quite answering your question as such, but there will be that link as those plans get developed.
Right. But I suppose in those circumstances, it ends up being retrospective. And my question was around what can we do proactively to ensure that situation doesn't happen, because it could, in some worst case scenarios, render a situation that's quite untenable for a dam owner. And it's changed totally out of their control, and they learn of it when it's too late.
That is exactly, and it came through the discussions with the Phoenix Dam, but we had no scope to actually deal with it in the hearing, and so we're just raising it. It's something for another time. I'm not sure how it can be fixed.
Yeah, I think it's totally understand your point. I think the point that the panel are trying to make is that councils don't need to go and have these conversations with PLAs around how we might be able to improve that process, but it's outside the scope of the policy itself. So I think by having 2C there, that's directing staff to go and have a think about how we might, and I don't know what that answer will be, but at least we'll be able to test that TAs.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
We've got a bit of a list here again. Somerville, Noon, and then Malcolm.
Yes. Section 6 notes that regional authorities have been working together to make a template. Was that the basis for our policy?
Yes, it was. And then when it was notified, the submissions changed some of the wording slightly.
Okay, thanks. And not one other thing, in the attachment, there was one paragraph, one section I could not understand. And I suppose my first question is, do I need to? Page 132, 10.3.3, this bit about referable dams. Now, what on earth is a referable dam?
There is not a referable dam. They haven't been defined, but we have to leave it in just in case it happens.
Right, so is that perhaps I don't need to know?
None of us know yet.
Right. Okay.
Right spotting, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Noon.
I'll just go back to Gary's question, and I wonder in the conversations that you have with the TAs, whether it's a practical solution to require a schedule to be added to their district plan where it identifies dams of concern, for example. So you've actually got a record, and then for the developers, for example, they come along with a bright idea where they want to develop residential activity. At least that would be a resource that would be available publicly where they could, you know, do their own due diligence, so to speak. Just for
Yes, thank you. And under the regulations, which have come in, we also have to have a register of dams and provide that information as well. So there's a couple of ways that the information we picked up, but very valuable suggestions. So thank you.
Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm continually concerned about people, or organisations that go into new areas and create hopefully unintended consequences for people that are already there. So the dam is built, it's been sitting there, it's been built correctly, everything's done right, it's ticking all the boxes, and yet it's going to be upgraded and its importance and the risk that it has because of coming put 1,000 houses below it. So I just wonder, really somehow we should be magnifying that responsibility back to the developer to ensure that he's actually protecting the dam owner. Surely there needs to be something going back to it. So you do that currently. TAs will do that currently under, say, wastewater infrastructure or water supply infrastructure, where they'll charge developers development contributions and parklands and the likes. And I just wonder, yeah, there needs to be some way of reflecting back to the change that the development is actually the effects that's actually happening on existing land uses.
So I'm just going to jump in because we're straying into the process that 2C is directing staff to go away and deal with. I absolutely understand the issue, which is the risk that arises when development goes into a space sometimes well after a dam's been there, and then the impact that has, and we can go away and explore that and identify what tools or mechanisms might be available within the current RM or other frameworks to deal with that and try and get some agreement with the TAs. It is outside the scope of the policy, but it's good. We've had a very clear direction from the council table that they do. What I'm taking is you would like that 2C to be explored closely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you're ready to move.
I'm very happy to move, and I'm sorry I brought up since that just shows the value of submission, so that those matters came up because of them, and so I do want to thank and
we're looking for a seconder. Which Councillor Weir, would you like to second this? Yep, thought you might. Brilliant. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor?
I will just say again, thank you to the submitters who brought some of these issues to our the fact that they came along and presented was fabulous and helpful, and I hope and I'm sorry it's taken so much longer around the council table to do this because of that great input.
Councillor Weir, did you want to say anything as a panel member?
Not particularly.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh.
So I just briefly wanted to say thank you to Rebecca for her work on this program. It's been excellent, so thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. I'd like to thank everyone that was involved as well, panel members, staff and submitters. Quite a bit of work going into this type of decision making. So thank you everyone. Thank you particularly indeed to Rebecca, and great to have you here today. Anyone else before we put this? No? Okay, so I think we'll put them all together. And you can see there's 4 recommendations there, so they're all going together. All in favour, aye, against, carried. Thanks everyone. On to 10.4, which is the delegations. Yep, yeah, exactly.
Let's move.
Yeah, it should be fairly straightforward, this one. Peter, did you need to say anything regarding it, or Joe, sorry?
I'll defer to Peter.
Thank you, and no, there's nothing really we need to add. It was just it was necessary to review the current delegations in light of the regulations coming through, where the current roles no longer reflected who was going to be doing the actual work. So it's simply an update to reflect that.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll move on over and a second. Does the mover want to speak at all?
No. Thank you to the staff.
Anyone wish to speak here? Appears not, so we'll put it all in favour. Aye, against, carried. Which then brings us to the end of our papers. Thanks very much, Joe and Peter. Yeah, thank you. So we will close off. Oh, recommendations. Yeah, I always have. Thanks, Richard. We do.
So that you really appreciate the work.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. So we got first up, recommend do we put them all together or we do one by one? Can't remember.
You can move.
One by one is better process. 11.1 recommendations of audit and risk subcommittee. Somebody want to move that? Thank you, Councillor Metham, seconded Councillor Malcolm.
Can I do that because I am the mover in there? Yeah, comfortable. Well, I'm comfortably seconded then. Just
Sounds fine to me. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 11.2 recommendations of the Environmental Implementation Committee. Councillor Wilson's moving. Councillor Scott is seconding. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Moved.
Yep. That's Public and Active Transport Committee moved. Councillor Noon seconded. Councillor Ware, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Didn't see you move.
11.4 is Safety and Resilience Committee. Councillor Somerville seconded. Councillor Kelleher, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks everyone. We did get to the end there. So yeah, we'll just close off with karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori e, ki runga ina iwi o te ao. Thanks everyone.